Melissa Manchester, welcome to Soul Sisters.
Thank you.
And I think we can make it one more time.
Thanks for coming in.
I like to be among soul sisters.
Yeah.
I do, yeah.
We know you have some soul, so you're an appropriate guest for us
Thank
to have on
you.
here. And we were talking about how we're surrounded by Billboard history with these books, but you have a lot of Billboard history.
Well, I do.
So you're also appropriate in that sense.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have come to Billboard to perform in the past, and I've been in Billboard many times over the years.
And
so
you've been on
this is
Billboard
incredible.
charts.
I have been on Billboard charts. Thank you.
Since the 70s,
Yeah,
I think.
that's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Since
that's
about
pretty
74.
awesome.
Thank you.
40-year career.
Zeroing in on 50.
Oh my goodness.
Zeroing in on 50. We're up to about 47 now.
Wow.
And we were talking about how you just put out 2 albums, or 2 albums were just put out.
I know.
One you knew
I
about,
know.
one you did.
Yeah.
I know. Well, one I was informed about, but yes,
Yeah.
I've just released my 21st album called The Fellas,
Congrats.
which is my tribute. It's a completion of an idea that started in 1989 when I had released an album called Tribute, which was a tribute to several of the women singers that meant everything to me. And I always wanted to follow it up with one that pays homage to the men.
Yeah. I love that you started with the women, though.
Yeah.
Well,
Women
where else
first.
do you start?
Exactly.
They're the ones that gave birth after
Exactly.
all. Anyway, and the second one, called Through the Eyes of Love, is a compilation of every single that was released while I was at Arista Records for 12 years. So it's 43 tracks.
So someone
Crazy.
unbeknownst
Lady
to you
collection.
I know.
was putting this together, and then how did this come into your consciousness that this was
Because Joe Marchese, who was in charge, had done an interview was doing an interview with me for the liner notes of Through the Eyes of Love. I said, "How exciting! This is really great." And then I told him about The Fellas. He said, "When is that being released?" I said, "September 8th." And he went, "What?" And so they were both released just a few days ago.
43 tracks.
Yes,
Wow.
amazing. Yeah.
Very cool. I mean, it's nice, like, people who want the full breadth of your career
Right.
can get it right here.
Because many artists don't have the full breath.
That's true.
They have a little gasp.
Yeah.
21
Very
I'm
true,
happy to
very
take a
true.
deep breath and
Yes.
a deep exhale.
Yes.
21 albums is just a big breath.
That's a feat.
That's
I
a
know,
feat.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I want to tell you, if I may begin by, I'm going to try to get through this without gushing.
Gosh.
Totally fanning out.
Why stop yourself now?
Okay,
Dee?
right, okay.
A year and a half into
How-
the podcast.
My famous gushing. How deeply profound it is to meet you, because from my earliest memory as a singer, really as a person, as a human being, it has been Don't Cry Out Loud. And which is a very funny thing to think about now. First of all, Bette Midler is my ultimate icon from growing up. She was everything to me, and it wasn't even like the body burlesque kind of like performance that she's so famous for, and I like you know, that is so iconic in a way that is not for like a little kid to sort of get into, but for her films and just her other musicality, I was a huge fan. So that's just the connection that you were in the Harlettes. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that. Sure. But Don't Cry Out Loud. I'm 5 years old. My older sister sings it in a talent show, and it just like becomes my anthem. And my dad, we sang at the piano all the time, and he would play, and I would belt that song out. To the point where we went on a vacation to Kutcher's resort.
Wait, you've been to Kutcher's?
Yeah.
Have we
I was
talked
like,
about this?
no.
And is proud to admit it. That's the important part.
No,
Yes.
we went to Kutcher's for my grandparents' 50th
Of course you
wedding
did.
anniversary.
Right.
My parents used to
Really?
go there once
Yeah?
in a while. Sure.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Kutcher's is it kind of reminded me of the place they go in Dirty Dancing. Like
Yes.
that must
Yes.
have been what it was like.
Yes,
in
Kutcher's,
that
Grossinger's,
time.
all those places.
Yeah.
Right, right. Kind of Jewish,
Like summer camp for
Homeland
adults
resort,
and
yeah.
children. That's right.
So my family went there, and there was a lounge singer there, and I was this little, I don't know where the balls came from, but I was like, I want to sing with you, and we kind of became friends, and she was like, what do you want to sing? And it's Don't Cry Out Loud, and the level of belting out this song with all of the emotion is like so funny to think about now, but it's so much a part of my soul, my musical DNA at this point. So it's an incredible privilege. To
Darah's been sitting on this story because I told her you were coming on, and she's like, "Don't cry out loud." I was like, yeah, and then she didn't tell me any more. I didn't know any of this.
Yeah.
You've been saving it. That's
sweet.
good. I like
So
it.
it's amazing to meet you, and I'd love to hear your feelings about that song, because now knowing the meaning of it as an adult, you know, it's tricky. It's the message of the song: don't cry out loud, keep it inside, learn how to hide your feelings. It's an interesting song. To me, that doesn't matter, because now it's a part of me, and I think once a song gets into your soul, that's also an interesting thing about pop music, I think, where the lyrics, it can become part of you, and you just sing it, and you don't really think about what might be the true meaning.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about your evolving or your forever feelings about this song?
Well, Don't Cry Out Loud was written by my very dear friends, Peter Allen and Carol Sager, and it sounds similarly lyrically to songs that I had written with Carol Sager. Carol was the common denominator between Peter and I, but I never wrote with Peter. When I first heard Don't Cry Out Loud, it was Peter's version. It was very quiet, and it was very sweet, and I thought, oh, the perfect idea for a lullaby, incredible. And I brought it to Clive Davis, and the next thing I knew, because in those days, you sort of just showed up in the studio. You weren't really conferenced in on arrangements and stuff like that. And so I went into the studio, and there was this massive anthemic arrangement, which just, it made my head explode, because it wasn't my vision for the song at all. And so the performance that I gave was one of intense frustration, but it worked because it serviced the lyric.
Totally.
And the thing that serviced the lyric equally was that the songs that Carol Sager and I wrote, because we were writing partners for 5 years, we only wrote about affirmation and declaring our presence as young women and as human beings and all that. And suddenly I was singing a song that started with the word "don't."
Right.
And I thought, how is this going to work for the rest of my life? And because I couldn't figure out what people were resonating with, what they were connecting with. And in the end, I realized that the song is about what we all have to learn about, which is how to cope. Coping seems like a very glib answer to it, but the construction of the song is so unbelievable. The lyrical construction is superb. And if you look at the story, the inner life of the world of the story is about learning how to cope, because no one will save you but you.
Yeah, there you go.
And it's to learn how to, well, she says learn how to hide your feelings, but for me, the reshaping of it so that I could wrap myself around it was to learn how to cope. And P.S., I sing it very quietly now, which is the way that I had first.
Oh, wow.
So I reclaimed it ultimately. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I mean, the lyric does go on "Fly high and proud."
That's
so,
the thing.
You know, there's the
thing.
back and forth, but that's so interesting that you do you get response from the different performers that people are like surprised to hear you sing it, not
quietly?
In that belting way, yeah.
They lean in much deeper, and they hear it differently suddenly, which is it's the magic of music, you know.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I mean, the line like "Remember, you almost had it all."
Right.
When it's belted,
heartbreaking.
Yeah,
it's heartbreaking.
It's a heartbreaking song.
Yes, and it is. And lyrically, that is something that in those years Carol wrote a lot about just missing things, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a beautiful achievement, actually.
Absolutely.
Because it's so enduring.
Yeah. This is a time jump, but it reminds me that I wanted to ask you about your what your personal feminism is now, because I know you sang at the Women's March this year in Los Angeles, and that was very important to you to be part of that.
In front of 750,000 of my neighbors. It was incredible.
Can you believe that many people turned out? I mean,
did.
I was at the one in D.C., and I thought that was going to be the big one, and then we started hearing numbers in L.A., and I was like, what? It's crazy.
Yeah, that's great.
Because, like, thinking about lyrics like from that song, you know, these are always complicated issues for women about what we're encouraged to do, how we keep ourselves safe. You know, it's not always the safest thing to express your emotions, and we have to like hold each other up and be better about these things, and you know, march together sometimes in times like these. You know, so like I don't know, what was it like for you to sing at that march and to be part of that, and kind of where do you see yourself fit in as a public figure?
That's a very interesting question, and thank you for asking that. When I first started writing with Carol, we did not know the women's movement. This was the early 70s. The women's movement was, this version of the women's movement was burgeoning still.
Yeah.
Gloria Steinem had just shown up. Ms. Magazine was just being published. And there was, Ms. Magazine did a TV special called Women Alive. And there was a segment, this is a long story, I'm sorry, but there's no way to shorten it.
Go for it.
But there was a segment on Women Alive where a union worker, she was trying to be an organizer, her name was Crystal Lee Sutton, and she was telling her kids, she had just gotten out of jail, and she was telling her kids that each of them had a different father so that they would be armed with that information before any of their school chums started to bully them about that information. And a song that Carol Sager and I wrote called Home to Myself was used to underscore that piece. And Crystal Lee Sutton was the prototype for the movie Norma Ray.
Oh, wow.
So suddenly a song that we had written, at a piano in front of a blank sheet of paper took on a new life. It was no longer mine. It belonged to a larger world. And though our intention wasn't to be feminist, we were young women writing from our experience because we had no other frame of reference. We were feminists, and I am a feminist. And the song that I sang, jumping forward to the march in L.A., was a song that I recorded on my 20th album called I Know Who I Am. And the thing about that song is I couldn't have written it a moment before I wrote it because I have earned every line of that song.
Oh, yeah.
And I wrote it with Greg Barnhill and Joanna Cotton. And, the bridge, and I said to the throngs, and it was so incredible to see this peaceful mass of women and babies and grandparents and husbands. And the police showed up at 4:00. I got there late because I was flying in from Boston. The police showed up at 4 because they had to clean the streets because it would be a work day the next day. And they saw that it was so peaceful that they just let it go. They just said, by 6, we do have to start cleaning up the streets. But by the time I got on stage, so many wise words had been conveyed. And I finally said to the throngs, all that's left is for me to recite a line, and if you could echo it back, that would be really lovely. And I said, I recited the bridge of the song, I am a woman who's worthy, I am a woman deserving, whatever it is, I can take it, whatever it takes, I can make it. And finally, I know who I am. And to hear 750,000 people echo those words back, it was so startling and thrilling and holding the center of a truth that all of us can claim whenever we wish. It was really magnificent.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is from the album previous to the one that you just
Gotta Love the
released.
Life. Mm-hmm,
You Gotta Love the Life.
Yeah.
And I was actually curious about that title, and that's a track, that's the title track to the song, to the record.
Yeah.
If that is sort of like a message to not only you, to not only your fans, but to yourself, like you gotta love the life, as if it's like a pep talk you have to sort of convince yourself every now and then, like this life is hard, not only this life, but this artist life, what you were kind of referring to. I Know Who I Am is close to the end of the album, but You Gotta Love the Life is the title track, and it's the first cut on the album. Yeah, that came out of the fact that, I've been doing this artistic walk for so long, and I wanted to lay claim to what I have learned, which is, besides the fact that the audition is never over, that though it is a rigorous walk because you have to keep reinventing yourself and always looking for the next dot to connect. The joy that keeps popping up. For me, my favorite metaphor is grass cracking through concrete, and that's what joy is. It always breaks through because you don't need anything grand to happen to you. Joy is an inside job. Joy is that spiritual component. No matter what, I will find the joy because it's such a privilege to walk the artistic walk, to me anyway.
I love that joy is an inside job. That's great. Yeah.
So, You Gotta Love the Life. So anyway, so that is about the hunger of the artist.
Yeah. Do you feel like you write more easily from a place of joy than a place of difficulty?
Well, I write from a place of urgency. When I have an idea, pardon me, come upon me, it's such a specific pull that it has a certain insistence to be expressed. And at this point, I can feel when that happens. And it doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, it needs to have attention paid to it. And I never know what it means. If I hear a collection of words, if I was eavesdropping on you, which I probably would, or you, which I probably would, if I heard a phrase, I never know if it's a title or part of a verse or who would be saying it, singing it. And then, I describe songwriting as peeling an onion from the inside out, because you just don't know what the information is telling you until you write the whole song. So, yeah.
Wow. That's cool.
Are these lessons that I'm sure you say that, you couldn't have written this song until this moment in your life. And is that, how you feel about all of your work? And did you learn, of course you're constantly learning, but did you learn specific things that you could say from Paul Simon, who you studied with as a kid?
Yes,
I mean, what was that like?
I know, unbelievable. I had gone to NYU School of the Arts for a minute, and college was not for me.
A minute, which is how long, actually?
10 months. It was 1 year, and though they invited me back, I said, I have to go back to work, but thank you very much. Because I was a working woman by that point. But my two friends, Jeff Sweet and Brett Mitchell, had continued on at NYU, and there was a scrap of paper, literally a torn piece of paper, on the bulletin board, because this is long before emails and all that. And it was a class to be taught by Paul Simon about songwriting and record production. And Bridge Over Troubled Waters was number one all over the world, so we couldn't figure out that it would be that Paul Simon, formerly of Simon and Garfunkel. And he auditioned everybody, and I played him a song, and at that time, Laura Nyro was my muse, so I would listen to her all the time. All the time. Yeah. So Paul had me play a song, and I said, play another song. I said, okay. And I played another song. He said, play me one more song. And I played one more song. He said, do you listen to Laura Nyro? I said, all the time, every day.
That's
he
awesome.
said, it's time to stop now.
Oh.
But yeah, and he was right. And the class was
funny.
fascinating because he chose very different types of young people to be in the class. Okay. And the assignment was to write a song for each week, and somebody would be chosen, including him. And we would present the song and talk about the song. And yes, what he taught me, and it is what I teach forward to my students, is that all the stories have been told. It's the way you tell your story, which is your stamp of authenticity. Right. And in those days, people were literally making up language. The Beatles had come up with "Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on." And, of course, Laura Nyro had sung, "Can you Surrey, can you picnic, come on, and Surrey down." And nobody knew what Surrey down meant, but we all got what it meant, viscerally. Right. So yes, that is what the whole.
I always wondered what Surrey
meant. Right. Well,
Does it not mean anything?
It doesn't really mean anything.
Okay.
Probably what it, if she was dancing to it, it would be a sachet.
It's like imagery, right?
It's a sachet.
Right.
But in those days, people were just making up language because they were rediscovering what the American popular song could be.
Yeah.
There was much more poetry involved. Joni Mitchell was showing up with much more poetry. Sly and the Family Stone was showing up with a lot of anthemic things. So it was a very interesting time. And it was before electronics, so the radio was really rocking with new thoughts about lyric writing. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I read that you described yourself once as part of the bridge generation.
Yes.
Which is sort of in between the American Songbook, which was like pop music in the 1930s to 50s, like Broadway and all those jazz classics, and then into the new singer-songwriters of the 60s and 70s. Right. And so you kind of straddle that.
I did.
And how pop music has obviously evolved and meant something different in every era.
Sure.
But I'm just wondering what I don't know, where you feel it is now, and the idea of needing to reinvent yourself, as you said earlier. Like, do you need to try out electronic music? And then I think for your last record, you went back to live instrumentation for the first time in a while. And it's like, you know, is there a I don't know.
Well, I think in the end result, I mean, first of all, it is what allowed me to record The Fellas, because that is the music of my childhood. That was when great singers had great songwriters still writing for them, because it was right before the singer-songwriter wave started. And so that is the music of my DNA. And also, songs were still coming from the stages of Broadway and becoming pop hits. And what is incredible about the experience of recording The Fellas is I recorded it with a student orchestra from Citrus College. This big band is made up of students from Citrus College, alums, and professors. And this is not the genre of the students. Hard swing is not the genre of these kids. But because they were thrown into the deep end of this musical pool and trained so magnificently by Bob Slack, who's the dean of the music department, this is a community school. This is a 2-year blue-collar community school, but their music department is completely rocking, and their studio is just unbelievable. So that's what I brought to the kids, and because they were trained to reach such high level of expectation, is they brought it hard. And they know that they are part of a larger adventure, because these are long musical lines and long lyrical lines and long sung lines. So they have to. So these are not short phrases, which is the aesthetic of today's pop songs. It's, you know, today's pop songs are rhythm driven as opposed to melody driven, and so the musical phrases, lyrical ideas are much shorter and are repeated. So it's much harder to develop a world. All of these songs have a developed world. And so for kids to accompany that, they're playing much longer lines because they're part of that larger world. So it's, and when I teach my singer-songwriters usually, I do assign them songs from the first volume of the American Songbook, because I want them to know what kids their age were singing in the, between the 20s and the early 60s, and it blows their minds. They can't figure out how people wrote that, how you would sing it. You have to breathe differently.
Right.
It's wild.
So let me ask about something that's happening today that will bring us back to, I know what Darah is dying to know about. Today we're premiering the video that you did with Barry Manilow. For the song For Me and My Gal, which is on the new album.
Yes.
And I believe you have a long history with Mr. Manilow.
I do. Barry and I met when we were jingle singers right here in New York. And we were part of a remarkable group of singers. In those days, Patty Austin and Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson, we were all jingle singers. And we made a really good living.
Yeah.
And Barry hired me to sing on a demo of his. And we've been friends ever since then. And when I approached him to create the only duet on the album, he came up with the idea of paying tribute to Gene Kelly, based on the original duet between Gene Kelly and Judy Garland from the movie of the same name, For Me and My Gal. So we had a huge, big time. And when he came to listen to the final orchestration at Citrus College, his mind was blown. I mean, he couldn't believe this place, because music education literally saved his life. So then he has the Manilow Project, which takes used instruments, refurbishes them, and brings them into public schools, because he really believes in music education. So, yeah, it was great. It was great.
Well, it looks like you guys are having a lot of fun.
Oh,
in
my
the video.
God.
Ooh, I haven't seen it.
Oh, my God. It's so delicious. It's really beautiful. Yeah.
So he's also the one who introduced you to Bette. Is that
He
correct?
did. He was just, he was her new music director. And she was playing at a club on 74th Street called the Continental Bathhouse. And I was playing at a club diagonally across the street called The Focus, which I was a silent partner in. It was a very interesting, wonderful place. And so on their night off, they came to see my set. And she had just been on the Johnny Carson show for the first time and tore the place up. And so after my set, I went over to say hello to them, and he introduced me to Bette. And I, we were all so excited for her, and asked her what she was up to. And she said she's getting ready for her first Carnegie Hall concert.
Wow. Oh
and I said, wow, that's great.
That's cool.
And I asked her, are you going to have any background singers.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I don't know. Would you like to sing in back
that was
of
the
me?
right question to ask.
Oh my God!
And
yeah.
I said, I'd like to sing instead of you, actually. But so at that point, I agreed to be your background singer, and Barry and I created the Harlettes.
No way.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was the toots in the middle.
Oh,
I didn't
for
realize
6
you were
months.
so
Me
integral
either.
to that being a thing. I thought you
yes.
maybe
I
just
was on,
were recruited to slip
I
in
was
there.
on her first album. I've seen that.
Amazing.
wow. So then all of the that is so integral to her sound then.
Yeah.
Like her whole
Oh
shtick.
yeah.
Ah, so you were singing and dancing and
Yeah,
it was
and
a little shake. I mean, it was shaking. It wasn't dancing.
But it
was
it was really fantastic because in the very beginning of her career, everything's about context, you know. In the very beginning of her career, she was galvanizing this marginalized gay audience that was floating out there and in danger all the time. Yeah. And when she sang her initial anthem, "You Gotta Have Friends," and brought them together, it was amazing to stand behind her and to the left of her and see the effect that she had on audiences. It was transformative.
Wow. So would you say her performance was one of the major takeaways for you as an artist?
Oh,
Like,
she's brilliant.
Yeah.
She's brilliant. And the thing is that it's not that she's only a magnificent performer. She's scholarly. I mean, she does exorbitant amount of research to understand how to get into something, whether it's just a song or something. I mean, you know, she and Paul Simon are similar in that way. They're very scholarly in their approach, and you don't know how it's going to end up, but it ends up really good.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it's so complete a vision, you know, and that's really something.
So then how did you then move from that to a solo career?
Well, I'd been trying to get a record deal since I was 15.
Okay.
And I would, you know...
Ambition, kids.
Ambition.
Ambition.
Yeah. And, well, I was having lots of adventures while I lived in Manhattan. You know, I was...
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Well, you know, when I was 17, it was the first season of Sesame Street. And it was just shot a few blocks from where I lived.
Okay.
And I banged on the door, and, you know, the old stage manager opened up and said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Anything. Just get me in the building." And so I became a gopher in the editing room.
Really?
Yeah, and the discussion at the first season, it was
amazing.
wild,
Yeah.
right? The discussion in the editing room for the first season was what would happen to the integrity of the show, Sesame Street, if they came out with a line of toys.
Wow.
Isn't that wild? It's a million
Oh
years
my God,
ago.
that's
I
fascinating.
know, right? And so
And now that's how everyone makes all their money
yes,
in
of
that
course.
children's
Yes,
world.
yes.
The
Well,
merchandise.
that's the truth. That happened before
Wow.
all of the slices of the pie were discovered.
Yeah. Oh
But
my
I was doing
God.
street theater and
Wait, can I just say,
Sure.
when I first moved to New York, my first week of living here, I took my resume to Sesame Workshop and brought it to the reception desk.
Yes.
And I said, I really would love to work here. If there's
Yes.
anything you can do. And
Yeah.
the receptionist was like,
Well, it was-
okay.
was
Like
it
trash
as-
bin, I think.
Well,
but
it was thrilling because years later I was on the Muppet Show, and to actually work with Jim Henson and Frank Oz and those incredible
yeah.
artists, and to see how hard it is to put one scene together.
Totally.
Brilliant.
I know.
Brilliant.
Also, last year I finally got to go to a taping, and
Of
it was
Sesame
something with
Street?
Ernie. There
Wow.
were like these two young singers who were doing a bit with Ernie, and so we went to do a Billboard coverage of it. And it was so bizarre to see the puppeteers underneath
That's
Ernie.
right.
It was a little bit like, I don't
magic.
know.
And when
if
you're
we're-
singing, when you
Magic
start
is
to
gone.
sing to them, you start to get into a relationship.
yeah,
like
with
this
that.
this
Right.
frog is real. Yeah.
yeah. Never mind the like 4-year-old men who are lying on the floor.
That's right. Amazing.
Yeah, it's
Amazing.
funny.
Wow, the different like little pieces and tidbits of your life that are just so like bizarre.
Right.
Like that's
Right.
a
Well, you live
time
in
that you wouldn't have-
chapters.
Yeah.
Yes, you live in
Yeah, I was
chapters.
gonna say it sounds like a memoir in the making.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so continue.
Yeah, so that was it. That's
So,
it.
so you were a gopher.
I was
on
a
Sesame
gopher,
Street.
yes, and I had done street theater, and I parked cars for a theater company, and I was singing commercials. So, and I had been trying to doing demos and submitting them to record companies, and I was summarily rejected over a 7-year period. And then I finally met Hank Medras and Dave Apple, and they were my original producers. And they brought me up to meet the late, great Larry Utall, who was the president of Bell Records. And in those days, there were album labels and singles labels. And Bell was was a singles label that was trying to expand into an albums label. And so I auditioned in a tiny room like this with a broken down upright piano. for Larry Utah and his fellas. And I played a couple of songs, and I think I was really tired that day. And at the end of the audition, I gave it everything I had. And as I was walking out, he said to me, right to my face, "How important is this to you?" And I said to him, "I will do this with you or without you. Goodbye."
That's the right answer.
And that was it. That was it. I got the deal.
Yeah.
It was
Amazing.
wild. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to have been your MO your entire career,
Yeah.
your life. Like it's the nonstop aspect of your. I mean, what is the secret to just the productivity? I mean,
It's the hunger.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the hunger.
But what's the secret to keeping the hunger?
Well, the hunger doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It doesn't go
You're born
away.
with it, and then
at
it's
this
there.
point, I sort of understand how my body works and how my mind works
Yeah.
because I've been doing it for so long. And I understand that when I'm finished with a project, my mind gets very quiet. But it is like a pet. I just let it sniff around until it gloms onto something, and then it gloms hard. But I just let it be because I have faith now that, something will interest me to the
Yeah.
point of compulsion.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And that's the way it works.
When you're working on your 21st album, are you thinking about your 22nd? Or do you
I'm sort
are
of.
you able to separate?
Well,
like-
this was such a gift that fell into my lap that I was thoroughly invested in it, and I wanted the kids to. I just wanted to not lose a moment of me witnessing these kids playing because it was just unbelievable. But now I'm starting to think of my 22nd. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's interesting you've talked about at different points in the music business, women or maybe people in general who are the artists singing a song that was written by someone else. They don't really have so much control or negotiation with the arrangements, and you kind of come in and do it that way. And then you talk about Bette, who was sort of more involved, and I guess there's been sort of an evolution of that. And I'm also just curious, you did step away from live instrumentation for a while.
I did, yes, because in the music industry in the early 80s, electronics started to insinuate themselves upon record making. And so really it became the arena and focus shifted towards the producer more than the artist, I believe. And so because I had been known as a balladeer with a room full of beautiful musicians, suddenly programming and buzzy, harsh sounds were part of the landscape. And because the record company presidents are only interested in what is current, and I was never interested terribly in what was current, but what was timeless. And so I always knew that these sounds were of the moment, and we would look back on them with a certain charm historically, but it wasn't what was necessarily bringing beauty into the world. And so I rode that chapter, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
That was like the 80s? Or
It
what?
was the early 80s, yeah, in the mid 80s. It was a lot of that. But then, I had great success with You Should Hear How She Talks About You, which was still very musical because my producer, Arif Mardin, was one of the greatest gentlemen and one of the greatest musicians I'd ever worked with. So he sort of massaged it to sort of, have one foot in both worlds. It was great.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you think about today as being an era of pop music without live instrumentation.
Yes. Yes. It's amazing. You can make a record where the only person you're seeing is the pizza delivery guy at 4 o'clock.
Right.
And you have no sense of
Totally.
the collaboration. There's no musical discussion about how to bring something to life.
Yeah.
And I really love that part. And when we were recording The Fellas, not only is the studio at Citrus College, it's also a teaching studio. It's enormous. But my engineer, Tim Jaquette, is also the professor of audio arts. So there would be a small group of engineering students behind him all the time. And as he's recording a room full of musicians, a full room full of musicians, he's asking quietly, he's asking the students behind him, why am I turning this dial? What is the effect I'm hoping for? And they answer him quietly. So the back and forth of what's happening in the room was blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Because it was all seamless.
Yeah.
Just
That's
all
awesome.
happens beautiful. Yeah.
So you're performing now? You're doing
All
shows?
the time. Yes,
Yeah?
I just did a show last night at Birdland. We killed it.
Nice. Love
And
Birdland.
I'm doing a show on Saturday night in Montclair, New Jersey, and I'm, on the road. That's what you do.
Are you? Yeah. Throughout the fall?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people can find you?
Of course, on melissamanchester.com.
There you go.
Because that's the part of the world I am in.
yeah. Always. Ever present.
Yeah.
And the new album is out called The Fellas.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Classics,
Thank you.
beautiful,
Thank
beautiful
you.
interpretations.
Yeah, and I feel
you.
like this is a good album to come out this time of year when people are spending time with their families, and
Yes.
it's that kind of music you can put on for any
Yes.
occasion, and
Yes.
people will be charmed and
Yes.
happy
Absolutely.
to hear
And
it.
for those who are interested in the history, there's
Yes.
this
Yes.
collection called Through the Eyes of Love, which is this collection of 43 singles that were released while I was at Arista Records. It's very dear.
Not too shabby.
It's just
Wild.
an album just manifesting for you.
I
It's so
can't
nice.
believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Let other people do some of the work, you
Right.
know?
Unbelievable.
You work your ass off enough.
I do indeed.
All right, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure.
Appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll see you back at Billboard again. Thank you. And if we miss you, we can always look through these books.
Oh
and
my
find
God.
you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Billboard. Fantastic.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks.